Millionaire marries a pretend bride for his sick mother until her one rule melts his cold heart. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The steady hum of machines filled the private hospital suite, their soft beeps echoing between pale walls and the smell of disinfectant. Ethan Hale stood by the window, his reflection cold against the rain-soaked glass. He had built his empire from nothing, turned a bankrupt startup into a global name, and yet at that moment he would have traded every dollar for just one more month of his mother's smile. She was fading, her voice now a frail whisper under the oxygen mask. The doctors had said the word no son ever wants to hear terminal. Every visit felt like goodbye. That afternoon, when her eyes fluttered open and found him, she reached for his hand with trembling fingers. "Ethan, I only want to see you happy," she whispered. "Promise me you will not be alone when I go. Let me see you settled. Please, son, marry, even if it is just for show." Her words hit harder than any boardroom battle. Marriage? He had no time for that kind of illusion. Love was unpredictable, messy. Business made sense, love did not. But the look in her eyes was not negotiable. That evening, the rain outside turned from drizzle to storm. Ethan sat in his car outside a small cafe on the corner of West 32nd Street, his phone screen glowing with a name, Lila Carter, a soft-spoken music teacher, 28, known for volunteering at children's hospitals. She had answered a help-wanted post that never mentioned who the employer was, only that it paid enough to erase her family's medical debt. When she walked into the cafe, rain clinging to her hair, she looked more fragile than he expected, yet her eyes carried something fierce. Ethan rose from his seat, tall, immaculately dressed, a man whose presence filled the room before he spoke. "Miss Carter," he said, sliding a thin envelope across the table. "I need someone to stand by me for 3 months. You will be my wife in name only. My mother is sick. She believes I am engaged." Lila's breath caught. She had heard strange offers before, never one like this. "You are asking me to lie to your mother?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I am asking you to help a dying woman sleep peacefully. There will be a contract. You will be compensated fairly. It begins tomorrow." Silence hung between them, broken only by the tapping of rain on the window. She stared at the envelope but did not reach for it. 3 months, she murmured. "And after that?" "You will walk away. No strings, no trouble, no contact." She looked up at him, then really looked, and for the first time something flickered behind his cold eyes. "All right," she said softly, "but I have one condition." He frowned. "Which is?" Her voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "I do not lie about feelings. If I ever care for you, I will say it out loud, even if you cannot say it back." For a moment, the thunder outside seemed to pause. Ethan studied her face, unable to decide whether she was naive or dangerously honest. Then a corner of his mouth curved, not a smile, but something close. "Fine," he said, "have your rule. It will not change anything." But as she stood to leave, her rain-damp hair catching the light, Ethan felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest, a feeling that no contract could define. And neither of them knew then that her one rule would soon rewrite both their hearts forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the gray clouds that hung over Manhattan. Ethan Hale's penthouse, usually silent except for the hum of the city below, was filled with quiet tension. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and new paper, the scent of contracts. Lila sat across from him at the long marble table, her hands folded neatly on her lap, eyes tracing every printed line of the agreement before her. 3 months. Pretend wife. Discretion required. Compensation upon completion. The words looked clinical, almost cold, but they carried the weight of survival for both of them. Ethan spoke first, his voice even, almost detached. "You will move into my home this afternoon. My mother's nurse will believe you are my fiancé. The ceremony will be simple, just for her eyes. After that, you will live here until she..." He paused. For the first time, his tone faltered. "Until she no longer needs to see us." Lila looked up from the papers, seeing something fragile behind his calm. "I understand," she said softly. I will not let her down. He nodded once, sliding the pen across the table. Then sign, Miss Carter. She took the pen, hesitated for half a second, then wrote her name. When she placed the pen down, Ethan slipped the contract into a leather folder as if sealing a deal that should never have been personal. Hours later, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming under a pale sky. Ethan's driver opened the door of a black sedan for her, and the ride to his estate felt like a transition between two worlds. The city noise faded, replaced by the rhythm of tires on wet pavement. When they arrived, the mansion appeared like something out of a dream, modern glass framed by old stone, quiet, intimidating. Inside, the staff lined up politely. Lila greeted them one by one, unsure how to behave in a place where even silence seemed expensive. The housekeeper, Mrs. Donnelly, offered a kind smile. You must be exhausted, dear. Dinner will be at 7. Mr. Hale prefers things punctual. Lila nodded, trying to ignore the feeling that every eye measured her worth. She followed a maid up the wide staircase to the guest room that would now be hers. The bed looked untouched, the windows open to the skyline beyond the river. She placed her single suitcase by the dresser, the only piece of her old life she had brought. As evening fell, she changed into a modest ivory dress and met Ethan in the main hall. He wore a tailored black suit, every line perfect, his expression unreadable. My mother is waiting in the garden, he said. She is having a good day. They walked through glass doors into a courtyard filled with the scent of jasmine. Under a white canopy, his mother sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a pale shawl. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling with joy. And this must be the lovely girl who has stolen your heart. Lila's pulse jumped. She bent down, smiling gently. It is an honor to meet you, Mrs. Hale. The woman clasped her hands. You have kind eyes, dear. Be good to my son. He pretends to be made of stone, but his heart is far too soft. Ethan looked away, pretending not to hear. The nurse brought out a small box, their wedding rings. Lila's breath caught as his mother whispered, Go on, exchange them. Let me see my boy happy. For a moment, everything else faded. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, his hand steady, his gaze firm. Lila did the same, her heart pounding against her ribs. The faint click of metal on metal echoed in the still air. His mother smiled, tears shining in her tired eyes. Perfect, she said softly. You two look perfect together. As she drifted back to sleep, Ethan turned to Lila, lowering his voice. You did well, thank you. Lila looked at the ring glinting under the garden light. It feels heavier than I expected, she murmured. He met her eyes for a second, then looked away toward the night sky. Everything real usually does. The morning after the ceremony began quietly. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows of the mansion, painting long stripes across the marble floor. Lila woke to the faint hum of the city below, still trying to understand where she was and what she had agreed to. For a moment, she stared at the ring on her finger, the thin band glinting softly in the light. It was supposed to mean nothing, but it felt like something she could not easily remove. Downstairs, Ethan was already seated in the dining room, reading the morning reports while a pot of coffee steamed beside him. He looked perfectly composed, as if yesterday's vows were just another business transaction. When Lila entered, his eyes lifted briefly before returning to the screen. Good morning, she said carefully. He nodded once. Mrs. Donnelly will help you with the schedule. My mother enjoys company in the afternoon. The rest of the time you are free to do as you wish, as long as you remain discreet. The formality in his voice stung more than she expected. Understood, she replied. After breakfast, Mrs. Donnelly handed Lila a small notebook, Ethan's version of house rules. 5 points, written in neat black ink. 1. No unnecessary press contact. 2. No interference with Hale Corporation matters. 3. Appear at social functions upon request. 4. Keep personal matters private. Lima. Respect boundaries. At the bottom, written in her own handwriting, was her single condition. If I ever care for you, I will say it out loud. As the day unfolded, Lila tried to find her rhythm inside this gilded cage. She spent the morning exploring the gardens, speaking softly with the staff, learning the quiet pulse of the estate. Ethan's mother was awake by noon, her strength flickering but her spirit sharp. Lila brought her tea and played soft piano melodies from the sitting room. The older woman's smile grew with each note. You have such warmth, dear, she whispered. It is exactly what this house has been missing. When Ethan came home that evening, he paused at the doorway, listening. Lila did not notice him at first, her fingers moving lightly over the keys, the music filling the air like sunlight after rain. Something in him tightened a feeling he had not allowed in years. She looked up when she sensed his presence. "Your mother wanted to hear something cheerful," she said. "I hope you do not mind." He shook his head, the words catching before they left his mouth. "It is fine." Dinner that night was formal but less strained. His mother's laughter returned in fragments, and for the first time, Ethan seemed at ease. When Lila accidentally knocked over a glass, the splash startled everyone, but his mother simply laughed harder. "A little chaos keeps us alive," she said, dabbing at the tablecloth. Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You are not as graceful as you look," he told Lila quietly. "Maybe I am not supposed to be," she answered. "Maybe your life needs a little imperfection." For a brief second, he looked straight at her, and something unspoken passed between them, an invisible shift, too soft to name yet impossible to ignore. Later that night, when the house had gone still, Lila stood alone on the balcony outside her room. The city lights stretched endlessly below, and the cool wind carried the faint sound of piano notes she had played earlier. She touched the ring again, thinking of his mother's fading smile, of Ethan's guarded eyes, and of the strange promise that tied her to this place. Inside his study, Ethan sat alone, the glow from his laptop dimming as he stared at the garden beyond the glass. He told himself this was just business, a necessary illusion for a dying woman's peace. But the echo of Lila's laughter lingered, soft and persistent, refusing to fade. He closed the laptop, leaning back in silence. Somewhere deep inside, the walls he had built began to shift quietly, almost imperceptibly, one heartbeat at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their strange arrangement began to take shape. To everyone on the outside, Ethan Hale and Lila Carter looked like the perfect couple, a poised millionaire and his gentle fiancée caring for his ailing mother. The media had no idea the vows were nothing more than ink and signatures. Inside the mansion, the line between duty and something deeper began to blur. Lila woke early each morning to make tea for his mother, helping her walk through the sunlit garden. Ethan would often watch from the balcony above, unseen, as the two women laughed together. It was a sound he had not heard in that house in years. One morning, his mother insisted that Lila accompany Ethan to an upcoming charity gala. "You must show her off," she said with a wink. "People should see the woman who brought life back into this place." Ethan tried to protest, but one look at his mother's fragile smile ended the argument. That evening, the house transformed into a quiet flurry of preparation. A stylist arrived with gowns, heels, and jewelry that sparkled under the golden lights. Lila hesitated at the mirror, feeling out of place in silk that cost more than her monthly salary as a teacher. "Mrs. Donnelly pinned her hair up gently. "Do not overthink it, dear," she said. "Just remember why you are here." When she descended the staircase, Ethan was waiting at the bottom, dressed in a black tuxedo. His expression, usually sharp, softened as he saw her. "You clean up well," he said, almost under his breath. She smiled faintly. "You sound surprised." "I am," he admitted, offering his arm. "Let us get this over with." The gala was held in a glass ballroom overlooking the river. Flash bulbs flickered, champagne flowed, and the hum of polite conversation filled the air. Ethan introduced Lila to investors, partners, and board members. She smiled through every handshake, careful not to reveal how overwhelmed she felt. Midway through the evening, one of the older shareholders, a man with too much money and too little kindness, looked her up and down. "So this is the school teacher?" he said loudly. "I must admit, Ethan, you have an unusual taste these days." A hush rippled through the group. Lila felt the sting of humiliation rise in her chest. Before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut clean through the noise. "That school teacher has more class than anyone at this table," he said evenly, "including me." The man flushed red, muttering something about a drink, and walked away. Lila stared at Ethan in disbelief. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." For the rest of the evening he stayed close, too close for pretense. When the orchestra played a slow waltz, his mother's favorite song, he surprised her by offering a hand. "Come on," he said. "For her." Lila hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved together under the chandelier, the city lights glittering beyond the glass. His palm was warm against hers, his voice low as he said, "You dance better than you pour coffee." She laughed softly. "You are finally learning how to joke." For the first time, Ethan smiled, a real, unguarded smile. The sound of her laughter filled the space between them like air after a long storm. When they returned home later that night, the house was dark and quiet. As Lila slipped off her shoes, Ethan paused by the doorway. "You handled tonight with grace," he said. "My mother will be proud." She looked up at him, tired but sincere. "I did it for her, and maybe for you too." He did not reply, but for the briefest second, his hand brushed hers as if by accident. The touch lingered, electric and uncertain, before he turned away toward the hall. That night, as Lila lay awake staring at the ceiling, she realized her heart was no longer following the rules she had written, and in another room, Ethan Hale, who once believed love was just a weakness, could not fall asleep either. A week after the gala, the mansion felt lighter. Ethan's mother had regained a little strength, her laughter often echoing down the hallways. The tabloids printed cheerful photos of the Hale couple, calling them a perfect match. Ethan ignored the attention, but his mother cherished every headline. Lila simply smiled and carried on, pretending not to notice how often Ethan's eyes lingered on her when he thought she was not looking. One morning, his mother insisted on holding a small garden luncheon to thank the hospital donors. Lila helped her dress, brushing her silver hair gently. "You remind me of myself when I was young," the older woman said. "Ethan hides behind his work, but you make him look up from it. Do not lose that, dear." Lila's throat tightened. She could not tell this sweet, fading woman that everything she saw was built on an illusion, so she just smiled and said, "I will try, Mrs. Hale." When the guests arrived, the garden sparkled with soft music and sunlight. Lila moved gracefully among the tables, making sure his mother was comfortable. Ethan, dressed in gray, handled conversations with his usual precision. Yet whenever their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet warmth neither wanted to admit. During lunch, one of the donors, a woman from the press, leaned toward Lila. "You are lucky," she said with a teasing smile. "Every woman in this city wanted Ethan Hale. What is your secret?" Lila's hand froze around her glass. "There is no secret," she said softly. "Just kindness." The woman laughed lightly, but Ethan, who overheard the words, felt them settle deep in his chest. For the rest of the afternoon, he could not look at Lila without remembering that answer. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the staff cleared the tables, Ethan found Lila in the piano room. She was playing the same melody she had played on their first week together, his mother's favorite. He leaned against the doorway, his voice lower than usual. "You do not have to play every night," he said. "I know," she replied without looking up, "but it calms her, and maybe it calms you too." He walked closer, the faint scent of jasmine still clinging to her hair. "You think I need calming?" "I think everyone does," she said gently, "even people who pretend not to." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the piano and the rain beginning again outside. When she finally turned, he was standing beside her, closer than he should have been. His eyes searched hers for something he could not define. "You are different," he said quietly. "You do not ask for anything. Everyone in my world always wants something." Lila smiled, her tone calm but steady. "Maybe I already have what I need." Before he could answer, his mother's nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Hale," she said quickly, "your mother is asking for you. She is feeling a little weak." Ethan hurried from the room, leaving Lila staring at the empty doorway. That night, his mother's condition worsened. The doctors said it might only be a matter of days. Ethan stayed by her side until dawn, his hand gripping hers. When she finally drifted into a fragile sleep, he stepped outside for air. Lila was waiting in the corridor, holding a cup of coffee for him. "She will be all right for now," she said softly. He looked at her, exhaustion clouding his usually sharp eyes. "You should not be here this late." "I wanted to be." Their hands brushed as he took the cup, and neither pulled away. The air between them was heavy, full of things unsaid. Ethan wanted to tell her that she had somehow become the only steady thing in his chaotic world. But before he could find the words, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his assistant. A meeting scheduled, investors waiting, deadlines approaching. The real world was calling him back, as it always did. He exhaled slowly. Thank you, Lila, he said, stepping back. For everything. She nodded, her smile faint but knowing. You are welcome, Ethan. And as he walked away, Lila realized that what had started as an act was becoming dangerously real for both of them. The following evening, the mansion felt unusually quiet. A faint wind brushed through the open balcony doors, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Lila sat beside Ethan's mother, reading softly from an old poetry book. The older woman's voice was barely a whisper, but her smile lingered. You have such warmth, dear. Promise me you will not let Ethan lose himself again when I am gone. Lila hesitated. He is stronger than he thinks, she said. His mother touched her hand. No, my dear. He is only strong when someone reminds him how to feel. The words sank deep into Lila's chest. When the nurse came to change the medicine, she quietly stepped out into the hallway. Ethan was standing there, his expression weary but composed. How is she? He asked. She is tired, Lila answered, but she still worries more about you than herself. Ethan looked away, his voice low. That sounds like her. He rubbed the back of his neck. Sometimes I wish she did not still believe I am better than I am. Lila studied him for a moment. Maybe she is right, she said softly. Maybe you are better, you just forgot how to show it. Oh? He met her eyes, something flickering behind the calm surface. You always say things that make no sense and somehow make me believe them. Lila smiled. That is what music teachers do. A quiet laugh escaped him, the sound unfamiliar but genuine. It faded quickly when the nurse returned, saying his mother was resting peacefully. Ethan exhaled, relief softening his posture. Later that night, he found Lila in the kitchen, making tea. The house was still except for the ticking of the old clock. You should rest, he said. I could say the same to you, she replied, handing him a cup. He took it but did not drink. Do you ever regret this arrangement? He asked suddenly. Pretending to be my wife? Living in this world that does not belong to you? Lila looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. No, she said, not anymore. It is strange, but I think being here taught me something. Kindness can exist even in places built on power. He looked down at the cup in his hands, steam rising like ghosts between them. Kindness, he repeated. That is not something people usually offer me. Maybe they are afraid to. He glanced up and for a heartbeat neither moved. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. And you are not afraid of me, Lila? Her answer was calm, steady. No. I see the man your mother raised, not the man the world writes about. Something in him shifted, then small but undeniable. He wanted to thank her, to say she had done more for him than she knew, but the words tangled in his throat. The next morning, his mother had another fainting spell. The doctor recommended keeping her inside, surrounded by calm and music. Lila played piano in the corner of her room as Ethan sat silently, watching his mother's fragile breathing steady with every note. When the song ended, she turned to him. She can hear it, Lila said. Even when she sleeps, music reaches where words cannot. Ethan's eyes softened. You always find a way to make things sound hopeful. That is my rule, remember? She said gently. To speak what I feel, even when it is hard. He gave a quiet nod. Then maybe I should start listening better. That evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Ethan stood alone by the window. He could hear Lila laughing with the housekeeper down the hall. The sound filled the empty spaces of his home with something human, something warm. And for the first time in years, he realized the thought of losing someone terrified him not because of reputation or legacy, but because he had finally begun to feel again. 2 days later, the illusion of peace shattered. The morning began with the usual calm, the scent of coffee, the quiet shuffle of staff, but by noon, Ethan's office phone would not stop ringing. His assistant's voice trembled through the receiver. Sir, you need to see this. It is everywhere. Ethan opened the link she sent. His jaw tightened as headlines flashed across the screen. Hale heir pays poor teacher to pose as his wife. Another article followed, each more vicious than the last. Photos from the gala were splashed across every major site, paired with the words contract, marriage, and fraud. Lila found him standing in the study, his eyes fixed on the screen. Ethan, what is going on? He turned sharply. Someone leaked the contract. His voice was cold, controlled, but his hands were clenched. It is public now. Every investor, every partner will see this. Her face paled. But I never did. He cut her off. Do not lie to me, Lila. The accusation hit harder than she expected. You think I did this? Who else knew? He demanded. My mother does not even know the terms. The staff would not risk their jobs. The only person who could gain sympathy from this story is you. She took a step back, hurt flashing through her eyes. You cannot really believe that. I have spent my life surrounded by people who smile while taking what they want, Ethan said. Forgive me for assuming history repeats itself. Her voice trembled, but her gaze stayed steady. I told you my only rule was honesty. I meant it. If I wanted something, I would have said so. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The damage is done. The board wants answers. I will handle the fallout. I suggest you stay out of sight until this dies down. The words burned as they left his mouth. Lila stood there for a moment, stunned before whispering, You are not protecting me, Ethan. You are protecting yourself. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The faint click of the door closing behind her echoed through the vast room. That evening, the mansion felt hollow. His mother, still weak, sensed the tension immediately. Where is she? She asked. Ethan hesitated. She needed time away. The older woman frowned. You let her leave? It is complicated, he muttered. His mother's hand trembled as she reached for him. Do not let pride destroy what love has begun to heal. But pride was all Ethan had left to hide behind. He buried himself in crisis meetings, press statements, damage control. Still, the photos of Lila lingered on every screen, her face framed by cruel words. Every headline felt like a mirror reflecting his own mistake. 3 days passed before Mrs. Donnelly handed him a sealed envelope. She asked me to give you this. Inside was Lila's ring and a short note in her delicate handwriting. I never wanted your fortune, Ethan. Only your faith. I hope someday you find it again. He closed his hand around the ring, feeling its cold weight bite into his palm. That night, he stood in the garden where they had first exchanged vows, the jasmine now wilted under autumn rain. For the first time in years, Ethan Hale felt completely powerless. His mother's condition worsened the next morning. The doctors whispered about her fading pulse, her lungs too weak to fight. Ethan stayed by her bedside, but his thoughts were elsewhere on the woman who had walked into his life as a stranger and left carrying the only truth he had refused to see. When the nurse urged him to rest, he finally stepped out into the hallway. The silence of the mansion pressed against him, every room echoing with the ghost of Lila's laughter. For the first time, Ethan realized he had been wrong, not about her honesty, but about himself. He had built a world on control, and now it was collapsing, leaving only regret behind. 2 weeks passed, and the Hale mansion felt like a shell, silent, immaculate, and hollow. The press frenzy had slowed, but the damage lingered like a stain Ethan could not wash away. The board at Hale Corporation demanded he step aside temporarily, citing personal distractions. He agreed without protest. For once, he had no fight left in him. His mother's room was dim that morning. The nurse stood quietly by the window as Ethan sat beside the bed, holding her frail hand. Her breathing was shallow but steady. When her eyes fluttered open, she gave him a faint smile. You found her, Ethan, she whispered. Do not lose her again. He tried to speak, but emotion broke his voice. I already have, Mother. She shook her head weakly. Then go and fix it. Do not wait for life to decide for you. Hours later, she was gone. Ethan sat there long after the doctors left, his hand still clutching hers. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain through the open window, the same scent that had filled the room on the day Lila first arrived. The funeral was small and private. No reporters, no board members, just a handful of friends and the loyal staff who had served the family for decades. When it ended, Ethan stood alone near the headstone, his mother's name etched into the marble. He whispered, I will make it right, I promise. That night, he opened his laptop and began digging into the source of the leaked contract. After hours of searching through emails and server logs, the truth surfaced. It was not Lila. The leak had come from his own office, from his assistant, bribed by a rival investor, hoping to destabilize the company. Ethan's chest tightened as guilt hit him like a wave. Every harsh word he had thrown at Lila replayed in his mind. He had accused the only person who had stood by him without wanting anything in return. The next morning, he drove across the city to the modest neighborhood where she had lived before their arrangement. The tiny apartment above a flower shop was empty. Mrs. Donnelly later told him she had accepted a teaching position at a community center outside the city. He found her there 3 days later. It was a Saturday afternoon, the building echoing with children's laughter. Through the glass window, he saw her at the piano, surrounded by a small crowd of kids. She looked peaceful, alive, free of the mansion's coldness. When she noticed him standing at the door, her fingers paused on the keys. The room fell silent. Slowly, she stood and walked toward him, her expression guarded. "Ethan," she said quietly, "why are you here?" "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough. "About everything." She crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. "You accused me of betraying you. You made me believe I was nothing more than a transaction." "I know," he said, "and I will spend the rest of my life making up for that mistake." The children watched from behind her, whispering softly. Lila turned slightly, motioning for them to continue their practice. Then she stepped outside with him into the crisp autumn air. Ethan took a deep breath. "My mother is gone. Before she passed, she told me not to lose you. I found out who leaked the contract. It was my assistant. You were never the one who betrayed me." Lila's eyes shimmered, but she said nothing. "I do not expect forgiveness," Ethan continued. "I just needed to tell you the truth." She studied him for a long moment. "Why now?" "Because I cannot keep pretending that I do not care," he said. "You asked me once if I was afraid of you. The truth is, I was afraid of what you made me feel." Lila's voice softened. "And what is that?" He met her eyes, unguarded for the first time. "Something real, something I do not deserve." For the first time in weeks, she smiled faintly. "Then maybe you are finally listening." Ethan reached into his coat pocket and revealed a small velvet box, the same ring she had returned. "This never belonged to the contract," he said quietly. "It belongs to us, if you still want it." Lila looked down at the ring, the late sunlight glinting off its surface. The decision hung in the air between them like a breath neither wanted to release. Finally, she whispered, "I do not know if I can trust you yet, Ethan." He nodded, his voice steady. "Then I will wait until you can." For the first time, the man who once believed everything could be controlled simply stood still, ready to earn what no amount of wealth could buy her forgiveness. Winter came softly that year, wrapping the city in quiet gray light. Ethan Hale kept his word. He visited the community center every week, not with flowers or apologies, but with small, consistent acts of humility. He helped repair broken benches, donated books for the children, and stayed through every piano recital Lila organized. He never pushed her to speak first. He only showed up, rain or snow, waiting for her to believe again. At first, Lila kept her distance. She greeted him politely, nothing more. But week after week, she saw the same man who had once lived behind cold walls now kneeling to tie a child's shoelace, carrying paint cans, laughing with volunteers. The arrogance that had once surrounded him was gone, replaced by quiet sincerity. One evening in late February, the center hosted a charity concert to fund new instruments. The hall was packed with neighbors, parents, and students. Lila stood on stage, adjusting the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. When she looked up, she saw Ethan in the back row, standing beside a group of children holding handmade posters that read, "Thank you, Miss Carter." As the music began, she played her mother-in-law's favorite song, the same melody that had once filled the Hale mansion. The notes rose and fell, carrying every memory, the contract, the pain, the laughter, the loss. When the final chord faded, the audience erupted in applause. But Ethan did not move. He simply stood there, his eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. After the concert, as the crowd dispersed, he approached her quietly. "You played beautifully," he said. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft. She would have liked it. Ethan nodded. She would have loved it. He hesitated, then added, "I have been working on something. I wanted you to see it." He led her outside to the front steps of the center. Parked by the curb was a small white bus, newly painted with bright colors and musical notes. Across its side, bold letters read, "The Clara Hale Foundation, bringing music to every heart." Lila covered her mouth, stunned. "Ethan, what is this?" "It is a mobile music program," he explained. "We will take instruments and teachers to hospitals and shelters. The funding will come from the company, but the vision is yours. It is what you are already doing, just bigger." Her eyes filled with tears. "You named it after your mother." He smiled faintly. "She wanted kindness to outlive her. You made that possible. Lila stepped closer, the cold air between them fading. Why are you really doing this? Because I finally understand your rule, he said quietly, to speak the truth about what we feel. He took a breath. I love you, Lila. Not the way I was supposed to in that contract, but the way I should have from the start. I love the woman who brought warmth into a house full of wall. And if you can still forgive me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love is real. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, brushing against his cheek as she looked up at him. You took your time learning, she whispered, smiling through tears. He reached into his coat pocket and opened the same velvet box he had once carried to her. The ring glimmered under the streetlight. Then let me try again, he said softly. For real, this time. Lila stared at the ring for a long moment, then at him. The ache that had once lived between them slowly dissolved into something tender. She extended her hand. You already started proving it, she said. This is just the final note. As he slipped the ring back onto her finger, the children inside began playing a familiar tune, the gentle melody that had once filled his mother's garden. Ethan looked at Lila and smiled. Looks like they found their song. She smiled back. No, Ethan, we did. And under the falling snow, two people who began as strangers bound by a lie finally stood together in truth. No contracts, no conditions, just love that had melted even the coldest heart.